This is actually the first time that I've ever told my story without completely reading it from the piece of paper. And so most of you in this room already know my core issue began with perfectionism, but some people that are listening online may not know that. So for a perfectionist, that's kind of a scary thing, even if I know my own life story. So I didn't prepare too much for tonight because I just wanted to be led by whatever God wants me to share. And we will do some question and answers at the end like normal. And so for those of you watching online, this is actually the Adonai House. It is part of a nonprofit that Jason and I own founded called the Adonai Foundation. And every Friday night we have dinner together and someone gives their testimony. So the Adonai House is for men. And so some of the men that you can see around the table live here and are going through our recovery program. But I am stepping on new ground by being the first woman given my testimony, and it's fitting because I am very close to these guys, and they have been there for me and Jason when we needed them, so it's just a beautiful thing. But I will talk more about the Adonai House and really kind of that story chronologically. So I mentioned perfectionism, and I really feel like our culture today epitomizes perfection. We see perfect bodies, perfect everything, perfect cars, perfect houses, perfect lives, but it's really all just a facade. And so, interestingly enough, something that I wanted to read that the Bible says about perfection, or I think it's about perfectionism, is in Romans 12:2. And it says, "Don't copy the behavior and customs of this world, but be a new and different person with a fresh newness in all you do and think. Then you will learn from your own experience how His ways will really satisfy you." So I was born in a fairly small town in South Carolina, and my parents are still married today. I was the baby of 3 children, and I had a really good life, a really good childhood. There wasn't a lot of dysfunction or anything like that, like a lot of people go through before, making some of the choices that I made. We went to church 3 times a week because my mom played the piano. My dad was a deacon, and Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday, if those church doors were open, we were there. But growing up, I didn't really feel a connection with God. I think some of that was to do with the teaching, and some of that was to do with just being a rebellious kid, being the baby of my family. I did not practice obedience well. I wasn't good with the discipline, so I really always just pushed the limits with everything. But some of the things from my childhood that I really felt kind of put me in almost this like performance type trap, or this perfectionism ways, were excelling at a lot of things. Or just, being in the school play at a young age, or, being the only girl to play in the church softball league, or these different things. My family was very athletic and played sports, so I grew up around that, and I was always striving to be better, even at a young age. I think some of it could have been coached, like my parents just, wanting me to be good at whatever I did, and some of it was just something inner that, was maybe even just written into my DNA to perform. But I do know that once I started performing well at things, I desired that attention. I longed for it. It became a need for performance, but also like accolades, just really excelling or seeking approval in a way. One of the memories I have from the first time I failed at something was in 3rd grade. It goes all the way back to then, and I still remember it like it was yesterday. I was trying out for the elementary school cheerleading squad, and I did not make it. And I'd already, like I said, I'd even already played sports in the 3rd grade, but not, I'd never cheered. And I remember leaving there so determined that I was going to do whatever it took to make the team the next year. And I think in some senses that's a really great thing. Oh, you don't give up, you try hard, but we need balance in everything in life. And so for me, looking back, I was just taking everything to the limit as far as trying to be the best at everything. So I made the team in 4th grade, the squad in 5th grade. By the 6th grade, I was the cheerleading captain. I had won the school spelling bee the 5th and 6th grade year. I was the, Peter Rabbit in the Tale of Peter Rabbit. That one's pretty funny. And I was the student body president of the elementary school. So those things aren't bad, but obviously this desire inside of me to fill some emptiness I didn't even know was there was just really in this whole performance-driven perfectionism thing. So that's just like a little bit about my childhood. And then, really going to middle school, I started excelling and you could play sports then. I was excelling in school. Had friends, those types of things. Still went, going to church 3 times a week, and that was great. But one thing I remember about middle school was there were times that I didn't feel enough for whatever reason, whether it was a story I was telling to a friend or something in that nature. I would embellish to feel better about the story, to make myself look better. Like they say, little white lies. And I don't know where that even came from. So that was something that was hard to deal with when I looked back at like just the way in which some of these behaviors, I wasn't taught. I never saw my parents lie or things like that, but I just started this kind of, wanting to be all things to all people. As far as my perfectionism in middle and high school, it continued so much so that I believe this was the first time. I did this later in life as an adult, but this was the first time in high school where I started living a dichotomy. If you are not aware of it, you're not alone. No one knows what it is. But a dichotomy is basically what I have in common with like Tiger Woods. So remember his story, and he was this guy to the public, and then he was doing these things behind closed doors. In that same sense, when I was going through high school, I was being acknowledged for, getting awards that people in my high school had not gotten before, and say like the volleyball player of the year for the state, and these different things. Kept my grades up, had a job, did all those things. I was the, people wanted their kids to be friends with me kind of person. But then behind closed doors, I was, sneaking out of my house and going to parties and drinking and hanging out with friends and just, a whole different person. So somehow I was just functioning, so I was able to keep up both lives. But obviously, if you go on too long like that, there's serious issues with everything from your brain function to, really just keeping up with everything. So another thing I remember is that I really felt like we say you don't know what you don't know. I remember thinking that I was supposed to live a perfect life. Some of that could have come from family influence, and some of it could have been that inner thing I've already mentioned, but I wanted to live this perfect life. So the problem with that is every time something wasn't perfect, I would, sweep it under the rug, pretend it didn't exist. Or if it was a relationship with a friend, with a boyfriend, whatever it was, I wasn't perfect anymore, so I'd wipe my hands clean and walk away from it completely unaffected because it didn't fit in my perfect little box. And, that's pretty crazy because we've all been in high school and we know that things aren't perfect. So just my ability to walk away from things or to end relationships or, to run at times instead of dealing with something, whether it be for the lack of conflict or confrontation, like I didn't like confrontation, or what became a major issue for me. But I continued playing sports and all of that. In college, I played volleyball as well, and I actually still worked, I had a job. But again, this perfectionism thing with being one person to, one whoever, the public, in the public's eye, and being another person behind closed doors continued. Like in in college, I was doing, I was always a social person. So I always remember wanting to be popular, and I was, but I would, be social, and I was, drinking with the boys and, proving how much I could, chug or whatever it was at the moment. I threw this huge party. My parents just reminded me of it whenever I was back from my high school reunion, when they went out of town one time. But, that everyone we only had 2 high schools, but there was so many people there from both high schools. Of course, the cops came, but in good Robin fashion, somehow I talked the cops into leaving. Like my dad and I were talking about it when I was there. We just don't even know how I was able to do some of the things that I did and get away with. But I also remember never really receiving any kind of repercussions for the choices that I was making. And then also in growing up in a small town, I think that it's natural. I don't think it's just my hometown, but you would sweep things under the rug and pretend they didn't exist so that at church on Sunday your family looked perfect. And everyone did that. It wasn't just my family, but I grew up in this kind of environment where I really did believe that I was supposed to be perfect and I was going to try my best, but in that side of my life. And then when something wasn't, sweeping it under the rug and pretending it didn't exist. So I think that in college, it's hard to think about. On one hand, I was, in the homecoming court. I was Miss Rock Hill, which was the town I grew up in. I was in the Miss South Carolina pageant. And on the other side, I was drinking and having blackouts and, experimenting with marijuana and eventually ecstasy. And and this is going to be shocking to some people, but I got my first, which is insinuating that there's more than one, DUI at 19 years old. So, and I, was having a conversation even with my dad about that when I was just home because just even the way that I was behaving and acting that night when he came to visit me in jail was just uncalled for. But these aren't things that people that have known me my entire life would ever think because of this persona that I put off. And what's even worse is that I knew I put off this persona, so this other whole half of my life was not authentic. And I liked that. I liked that I could get away with putting off this certain image. I mean, it was up until even I met Jason and we started dating that I put off this vibe like I had it all together, and people believed it, and I wanted them to think it, and I think it was just trying to to fool people. But, you know, I think the other thing that, you know, for you guys, because guys can have strains of perfectionism too, and I do think that perfectionism has a lot of different ways that you can have perfectionistic qualities. And for people that are online watching, there's a lot of ways that you may be dealing with perfectionism and not even realize it. So for me, I didn't realize there was anything wrong with it. I mean, it was years later that I first said, oh my gosh, this has been completely debilitating and devastating in my own life, and it's a problem. Like, I thought it was that thing that you said across the table in a job interview when they said, what's your biggest weakness? You gave yourself a wink wink and were like, perfectionism. Like, I didn't get that this is wrong, like this is wrong. And I remember having this aha moment after I started going through some recovery for perfectionism about Jesus was perfect, and so we don't have to be. And I remember that was the biggest weight taken off of my shoulders because, again, like I mentioned in the beginning, we feel like we are supposed to strive for this. Our culture, tells us that this person's better than this person and this person, so you're always striving, whether it be in your work or in your home life or in your church life or in your community. And it was such a big relief to know that Jesus was perfect. And because Jesus was perfect, I don't have to be, nor does God ask me to be. So that was a really cool thing. But also tied very closely with perfectionism is control. And so up until this point in college, and shortly after college, I had always been in control. I mean, like I said, when I talked about walking away from situations or things when they no longer looked perfect, that was a control. And so up until this point in my life, until right when I moved to Tampa, I had everything in control. So guess what you're about to hear, how I did not any longer could have this in control. So I think some of this I'm going to read just because it's probably one of the more difficult parts for me to talk about. But this is dating back now all the way to 2001, and that's when I moved to Tampa, Florida, to coach high school volleyball with my sister at Jefferson and to be around her family because she had 2 small children. I was only supposed to stay for 2 months, and then I really loved Tampa. I wanted to get away from kind of a crowd that I was hanging out with, and at the time I had lived in Charlotte, North Carolina, just north of where I grew up. And so I saw it as a way out, and I flew home to see my parents at Thanksgiving, and I drove a 27-foot Penske truck back by myself with all my belongings in it. And I had moved out of my sister's house because I lived with her for the 2 months. My niece had just been born and my nephew was about 18 months old. And I'd found a job working in West Shore at an investment company. But that's what I thought it was. It was actually a boiler room, if you guys have ever seen that movie or heard of that. A place where stocks are pitched to financial advisors or stockbrokers all over the country, and as they purchase stock, someone's sitting on the other side dumping the stock they own until it becomes until the stock becomes worth nothing. This is basically illegal and all these things. The job was my worst nightmare, but in the beginning I was just doing the office managing, so I didn't even know what was going on. I didn't even have a part in that. In that, I didn't even have an understanding of it because I was just doing admin work and answering the phone. So one of the guys that worked there asked me out to dinner. And, I'd just gotten to Tampa. I didn't know anybody. Not that I'm justifying these actions, but I thought there's no harm in dinner. So I said yes, but boy, was I wrong. At first, it wasn't really a big deal because it was just dinner, but it wasn't too long before I realized that this was no relationship I wanted to be a part of. I remember being asked to go out to my car in the parking garage in the middle of the day with this guy, and he asked me to try cocaine. We were talking at noon on like a Tuesday or something. So obviously I said no, and I still said no until he forcefully stuck it up my nose. And I remember it went all over my car. And I wish that's like where the story ended, and I, never showed back up to the job, and I disappeared from Tampa and whatever. Like, I sometimes wish that, but I mean, no longer do I wish that. But at the time, I think, what was it? But from there, the coercing continued, from sexual boundaries to introducing new chemicals. I wasn't comfortable with anything. I was being forced to take GHB or being forced to snort cocaine, to the point where I just decided this was the only way I was going to be able to deal with what was going on around me. I quickly realized this did not fit in my perfect life. The only problem, though, was that for me, I felt there was no way out. I forgot to mention in the meantime that he had added his name to my American Express card, and I didn't want to do that. I was, 21 years old, and I had an American Express Gold card. But at the end of the day, it was something that I wasn't really given a choice in. And I thought, what's the harm that can happen? It's a $500 balance. The worst thing that's going to happen if I'm being, basically physically forced to do this, what's the harm? But unfortunately, I did find out what the harm was, because after a couple weeks, I found out that he had placed a 3-way call with American Express and a banker from Colonial Bank, or not a banker, like the president of the bank or something, and some girl pretending to be me, and they had changed my limit from $500 to $85,000. He also then bought a Mercedes on that card for $37,500, and then sold the car, a little bit later, and kept the cash. So, obviously I never even had an account with that bank, so I tried to do what I thought I could do while trying to get out of this relationship. But now, if you guys know, in any situation you've ever been in, it was like this power that he had over me. And I kept thinking, like, this is life or death here in my mind with the money situation, and I would never come back from that. And this is life or death in some of the things that he was saying to me, like, if I can't have you, no one will. And this was all the while, this happened in a fairly short amount of time, and I had, perfectionism issues over here, so I didn't want anyone to know what I had gotten myself into. So I was going to fix it myself. Then on the other hand, it was going downhill fast, and I didn't know what to do or where to turn, and I really didn't know up from down. Other relationships, I was able to walk away. I was always in control. But this time I couldn't just walk away. I wasn't in control, yet here I was, an adult responsible for my own actions. Psalms 40:12 says, "Problems too big for me to solve are piled higher than my head. Meanwhile, my sins, too many to count, have caught up with me, and I'm ashamed to look up." The next thing that happened was he wrote me a check for $2,700 and said, "You have to go cash this." But there was a bank outside our building, and I said, "Absolutely not. There's no way that I'm going to do this." He said, "I guarantee you the money's there." Long story short, we went to the bank. I was really testing my limitations to speak against him, and I said, "I'm not cashing this. I want to see the bank manager. I'm not cashing this check unless you can guarantee me there's money in there. I'm just not going to do it." And I remember I think, I don't want to quote this wrong, and I know this is old, I think I had about $900 in the bank. That was all I had to my name. And the bank manager goes back there, and here I am thinking, okay, something's going to happen to me just because I tested him in front of these things. I mean, this guy was so whacked out of his mind on every drug you can imagine. It was awful. And basically, the manager that came back and said, 100%, this check is good. Cashed it, gave him the money. And then, of course, in a week, I think I found out it was a bad check. It took close to $1,000 out of my bank account, and now I have negative $1,700 that I owe the bank. I had just left the job, but because I just, was trying to just get away and escape, and he started showing up at my door. I told the gate at my apartment complex that he wasn't allowed in, And then he somehow got past the gate and slashed the top on my convertible and did some other damage to the car. And so I knew I needed to get away. At this point, I was really, fearful for my life. And so I moved. I really feel it was God. At the time, of course, I wasn't giving God credit, but he opened the door for me to have this free place to move into, across the bridge in Clearwater, Florida, and I literally moved in the middle of the night. I don't even believe telling my sister that I was moving, and she lived, just 5 minutes down the road from where I was. So that was pretty crazy. And at that point, I had to basically start over with trying to find a job. I couldn't go get a bank account. I had absolutely no money. And that was really kind of when my two worlds collided, when I could no longer pretend my life was perfect, that I really had to face everything that had happened, and what was real and what was a facade, just pretending that I had it together and this. So one of the things that I had written here from another time I told this is that's when my two worlds completely collided. I could no longer pretend I had it all together. Here I sat, no job, no credit, and now no money. I could no longer pretend I had this perfect life. I didn't have a perfect life. In fact, my life was so far from perfect that I didn't even know how I was ever going to recover from what had taken place for the last few months. The things I had take place before my very eyes, the things that I was coerced to do, haunted me for a very long time. So, in this time, I was very depressed. I was deeply damaged emotionally, sexually, mentally. I was even suicidal. It's crazy to think that that's how far I went, but I just thought about how I would never be able to pay off that credit card, how I couldn't even get a bank account. And in my mind, if I couldn't live the life I had created in my other life, I didn't want to live at all. And it's a very scary place to be in. So, as God would have it, I would draw closer to him during this time. Remember, I grew up in church, but I had gone far away from him. Over the next couple of years, I slowly got my life back together. I started my first company, which was a public relations firm. I moved back to Tampa. No one knew about that part of my life. I was very, I was in different social circles and, going to charity events and doing all these different things. One of the things that was really bad about that time was I continued to socially use cocaine. And of course, I was still drinking too much. But I think part of me it was the way in which I was coping with everything I had just endured. And the other part of me looking back, obviously, and, different perspective, was it wasn't my fault that it was forcefully shoved up my nose or that I was forced to do it on multiple occasions. But continuing to do that and take it into another relationship and that was on me. And that was something that I couldn't say I was not guilty of, that I needed to, everything from repent for it to understand why and how and all those things. So the next issue that came up, because in good perfectionism fashion, I just kept, compartmentalizing, pretending that never happened, moving forward, excelling at things, being a young entrepreneur. That was when the whole young professional kind of craze started, and I was really getting, I hate to say it this way, but almost put on a pedestal in some light for being young but being successful and in my career, I was willing to adapt to all these new technologies coming out. Like I started my first company in 2005, the year between Facebook being founded in 2004 and Twitter being founded in 2006. And social media was not a part of public relations back then, but I wanted to find out all about it and add it to my repertoire, partly because I needed to get all the business I could being new, but second, just because I was young and wanted to find out what was new. So in my industry, it really made people older than me look up to what I was doing in my company because I was taking risk and I was doing these things. And unfortunately at the time, I was allowing all the credit to be me, and I wasn't giving God any of the credit. So here I am getting awards and, really becoming prideful and arrogant and thinking that all things were because of me and me this and me that. So that was a whole nother thing. But, God had been tugging at my heart, and I knew that I wanted to stop socially using cocaine. And I knew that I was drinking too much. At least back then I would have a plan. So if I'm going to drink this night, I would always have a driver or do this. But still, it just got to the point where it just wasn't something that I wanted to do. And God removed those desires away. But still, I wasn't ready yet to deal with, the things that I went through. So enter in Jason, my husband. We met at a singles program at our church. I had just started going. God really just opened the doors for me to find this church, and a bunch of guys played sand volleyball 3-4 times a week, and I wanted to play. And some of you guys have heard this story, but Jason's side is funnier and much different. But they needed one girl. You had to play with one girl for this singles conference we were going to over like Labor Day. And, at the time when I think about it, it's like I would never, it wasn't who I was. It wasn't what I did. I would go to a party in Miami over Labor Day, or I would go to the beach and hang out with my friends all Labor Day. I wouldn't go over to Daytona with a bunch of singles for a church conference. But I think the volleyball thing was what made it appealing to me, and these guys and all these new friends that I had in this singles group. But, I loved what I was learning. I loved what I was feeling. I loved the people. And I just really knew it was about time to start dealing with all these things from the past. So Jason and I start dating, we get married. We've had a lot of tragic and traumatic things happen even just since we've known each other. Like when the night we talked about getting married for the first time and we went and looked at wedding rings, instead of going out to dinner, we were on the computer searching what kind of rings I would like. The very next day, he broke his leg in 2 places with no insurance, playing soccer in the intramural championship that I told him not to go to. And couldn't walk for like months. Like we didn't even know if he was going to be able to walk down the aisle. It got to a point where there was like, the first surgery was bad and, all these things. But this was also the time of really when we first started to feel the recession in America. And I believe that even when we were planning the wedding, people were like, your business isn't seeing the recession. I'm like, oh no, everything's great. And then just like that, right before the wedding, I lost 2 major clients. 2 other people owed me money and said, hey, we can't pay you anymore. And just like that, it was a complete, turnaround. Looking back, I really feel like God was removing, almost like pulling the rug out from underneath us, so that I would focus on Him and not work or money or success, accolades, any of that stuff, being this person, and that I would really just understand that He was the one that controlled everything. So right after the wedding, I remember I had a business and an office to run and all these things, and I remember that we used money that people had given us as wedding gifts to pay our mortgage and rent on my office just to keep us going to the next month. Because he couldn't even, I think there was a long time that he couldn't even drive. And it was just crazy. We went down to, and then like everything just was crazy. And I remember being in a Bible study, and I knew that I had issues. They were starting to show their ugly face in my marriage, because for my whole life, besides the one controlling situation that I mentioned of abuse, I could walk away from anything. I could wipe my hands clean from it. In fact, I remember being so hard and emotionally, just unattached when Jason and I started dating that I don't even know the last time I had cried. I didn't emote, as they would say. I didn't share emotion. I didn't feel. I just was hard, and I know you guys can't picture me like that now because I'm just the sweetest, and I just have all these emotions. But no, I really just was not a good person, but I thought I was a great person. Hindsight's 20/20. But back to what I was originally saying was just in reference to this Bible study that I was doing. I knew things needed to change. I knew immediately that my marriage wasn't perfect, and I couldn't run from it. I'm like, wait a minute, I'm stuck here, and no one told me that this first year is going to be difficult. We basically both had our own houses, both owned our own companies, both had our own stuff, and I was 10 days shy of 30 and he was 35. So trying to then put that in a marriage is difficult. And I had never lived with anyone. He had lived with Austin's mom, my stepson, but that was hard work, and I didn't know it was going to be hard. And I didn't know this whole marriage thing wasn't, just all rainbows and sunshine, because I don't feel like the people around me at that time were really being real with me. Like when I hear someone's getting ready to get married or just got married, I tell them point blank, listen, let me give you some advice. This is what really happens. This is why marriage is really tough. This is why so many end up in divorce. Like, know these things going in, because I feel like I was just shell-shocked. And my parents are still married today, so I feel like I just was in this little marriage bubble, not realizing that, I'm actually going to have to work at this, and that the honeymoon stage, once you get married, it just dissipates. So I knew I needed to work on myself and everything, like I was saying, my perfectionism, that I didn't realize was a problem. And so that was really the start of it all, when I could surrender that perfectionism to God and see that Jesus was perfect, that I didn't have to be, but also really take a look at all the times in my life, through the times I mentioned, growing up to being in my 20s, that perfectionism was very devastating and even debilitating in my life. And this dichotomy, that I was living in was so unhealthy and just mentally unstable, and that it was okay, that God accepted me for who I was, and, that my husband accepted me. One of the things I didn't mention yet, but some of you that saw the Facebook event know that this was going to be a topic of discussion, is that I started to realize the issues I had with intimacy in my marriage. And, Jason and I had decided, unlike our other relationships we had been in, that we wanted to hold on to that covenant and not have premarital sex. We decided that. What I didn't realize is that in my head, sex was the last thing I ever wanted to do ever again, from what I later discovered was abuse. For a long time, I did not see it as abuse because I always took the blame. I felt like I was an adult. I put myself in that situation, and so it was my fault. It wasn't until years later that I started dealing with it and picking it apart with my Christian counselor, that I started realizing I was the victim, and that released so much for me because I didn't want to see myself as a victim. I was an adult that could make my own choices. So that was something that was really hard. Now I've dealt with perfectionism, I've dealt with control, but then I get in this step study and start going through the 12 steps with a small group and realizing that I have to deal with intimacy issues as a result of sexual abuse. Well, thank God, God didn't reveal that to me on the first day when I found out perfectionism was wrong, because I probably would have gone and jumped off the skyway. But I really do believe that God, it's not that He only gives us what we can handle, because as you guys know in my story, I'm getting ready to talk about the big C word, but I feel like in those situations, He only revealed to me what I needed to know and work on, and that all the rest of it was going to be too overwhelming. So I dealt with the perfectionism, I dealt with control, but much like the peeling back of the layers of an onion, we're always to just get, molded and made into who Christ makes us to be, and these things revealed to us, or who Christ made us to be, sorry. So basically with the intimacy, that added a lot of feelings in my marriage for Jason, because he felt like he had done something wrong. Here we are, having said we were going to wait until we get married, and then we get married, and you're all men in this room, so it's harder for me to sit here and have this discussion with you guys, but it's as far as me and Jason, I was like, whoa, I'm having issues. This stems from my past. This isn't you. He felt this is me. And so we really had to break it down. I really had to surrender then my intimacy issues and start working on that. And much like a perfectionist, I had my little checklist, and I was checking things off and thought, okay, I'm seeing recovery from it, just like perfectionism. But that wasn't the case. I remember getting to 8 months, like you guys count sobriety from drugs and alcohol. Well, I remember surrendering this intimacy thing. And I remember getting all the way to 8 months, and I had taken a chip in my small group for 30 days and 60 days and 90 days and 6 months. And I was getting ready to get my 9-month chip, and I realized, wait a minute, this isn't any better today than it was back then. Yes, I checked some things off on the list, but I'm not truly working on this. And I decided I was going to start over at day one, and seek wise counsel about what it means to have a biblical marriage. And what that looked like was, me sitting so close to Jason in this one counseling session. We were knee to knee, eye to eye, and in front of my counselor, sharing with Jason everything I had ever been through in that situation, everything I had ever been coerced to do, everything I had ever been forced to do, everything that happened in front of my eyes, so he could understand what was really truly me and not him. And man, that was really difficult. Just like you guys took a take an inventory with, put it on your 4th step and all that. I did a sexual inventory to go with my counselor and really work through these things. It wasn't until then that Jason really did see that it wasn't him, and that to be his part of the marriage, he was going to have to support me and be there with me. I mean, some of these things were so traumatizing that literally it changes your brain path. These things happen, and Dr. Jeffries is not in here over me. That was the first time I went to see you and get some counseling on that with you, because literally so many traumatic things had happened that it was, something down that path would start, and there I was in this trauma situation that I couldn't save myself from. And so that's obviously unhealthy in any type of relationship, but specifically in a new marriage. But we both spent that entire first year, I say I spent more time trying to get out of it than I did staying in it. And that's hard to think about, but it's true. Because I just didn't realize, God brought us together for a reason. And so what's amazing is now we've been married 8.5 years, but it was just a short time after that I really understood. God started revealing to me all these reasons and ways that Jason was the only perfect person for me in the entire world. Like just that we were uniquely created for each other. And that is something that you guys all have to look forward to, because I firmly believe that God knows who that person is, and he has created that person. And so that was the good thing for that. But we still had a lot of work to do. I had surrendered my life over and things had changed, but that didn't stop things from happening. There's people that believe once they get saved or turn their life over to Jesus, surrender, do these things, that they won't have any more problems. And it is true that you will be able to deal with them, be able to cope with them. You guys all know that because you've had, your own issues. But, man, we've had, just as hard things happen as, now that as we did before. The difference is our foundation in Christ, and knowing that everything that I need to get through any type of situation, God has already built inside of me. It's already in my DNA. He's already given us that power through the Holy Spirit and, through the knowledge of His Word. There was times of not knowing why I wasn't getting pregnant and those things. And that was a year or so later after I had talked about getting to 8 months and then starting over. And we were leading a Bible study called Life's Healing Choices, where you really do get down in the nitty-gritty of kind of like your past and things. And I will never forget this because we had just led it another time. This is this new group coming in, and the very first night, this girl says, "So are you the teacher, or do you take this with us?" And I was like, "Oh, no, well, really, I'm just a moderator. I just, moderate and keep the conversation going, answer any questions." But God really convicted me of that night. I couldn't sleep, and really showed me that I was to go through this now 8-week study with the focus on intimacy. I had never done something like that before. And so it allowed me on week 2 of this 8-week study to open up with them and to share that with them, and to share with them my struggles and my, being upset with not having been able to get pregnant, and, my biological clock was ticking and I wasn't getting any younger and all these things. But really what was amazing was then I spent 8 weeks specifically on that, and I received the best healing that I had ever received on that. The other amazing thing is the next week I got pregnant. So that was pretty cool, because I felt like that was a blessing for me being obedient to having tried for so long on my own, and knowing that in my mind, sex was just something that you did to have children, not for any other reason. And so the healing in that was tremendous for me, as you guys know the way that God designed marriage. So I know you guys met my little bundle of joy a million times, and he's so close to you guys. But we lived in this house at the time, and we always knew before we bought it, it used to be a church, and it was built in 1927 and had been converted to a house in the 80s by a retired USF professor, and we just got really lucky in getting it because my company had just been purchased by the largest PR firm in the Southeast. It had gone down in the market. It was the time to buy. We wanted to buy our first house. There was a home credit. All these things lined up. Besides the fact that the first time we came and shared it with all of our friends in real estate, they said, "Don't you dare buy that house. You'll never resell it. That's why it's been on the market so long. Blah, blah, blah." And you guys obviously know the story, but in case people watching online don't, God individually told both Jason and I that week that it was supposed to be ours for now, but not forever. And so we bought the house, knowing that it was going to be some type of group home. And right after I got pregnant, I was basically pushing Jason out the door, saying, "Now's the time. I don't want to move when I get, too fat." And I also don't want to be trying to move when I have a little kid, running around, and it was completely just excruciating. Work was excruciating. So we had this great story. I don't want to get too long in that, but we had this great story happen where God presented this opportunity for us to move into this home. Move into a home. And so in February of 2013, while still pregnant, we moved out and into a rental, and a month later opened up the Adonai house for men battling addiction. And so that was amazing. Obviously it didn't pay the bills, but God had blessed my company. Well, the people that bought my company, hired me to work for them. And then after that, when I saw they didn't do business the way that I did, and I didn't want to be a part of the problem, but a part of the solution, I left a year later and started another company. This time wanting it to glorify God, wanting to make sure that I woke up knowing that He was 51% owner of my company and I was 49%, that He gave me the work to do in His will, and I was obedient and did it. So in order to not try to lift my name up or do those things, we decided to name my PR firm Adonai, which is a reference to God in the Bible. So that's actually an interesting thing you guys might not have known, because my company came before the foundation. So we had Adonai LLC, and then that was in 2010, and then in 2011 started the Adonai Foundation, and then in 2013 opened the Adonai House, where you guys live now. And that's had its own set of ups and downs. It's just as far as getting so attached to the guys that come through the program, to really just, it's something that Jason, really does 24 hours a day. And, it's just been hard. I love all you guys to death, and I just am so appreciative of everything you guys have done for us, because that really meant the difference in 2015. So if we skip forward to 2015, that was when, actually the end of 2014, God started doing some things with my business. I had clients leaving, but they were happy. And somebody retired, and this person and that, and I was like, okay, God, I know you're up to something. I didn't know what, and all I knew was at the time, Jason was, basically taking a zero salary here, and God was blessing my business to pay for everything from, this house mortgage to our rent to, Jason's child support to all of our bills. And my company was the largest donor to the Adonai Foundation. So I was like, okay, God, well, you're up to something, but I, have a lot of mouths to feed. I have a lot of responsibilities, a lot of weight on my shoulders. So I trust you, but do I trust you? I trust you, but do I trust you? And so He really just took me through this prayer journey of, letting me know that everything was going to be okay. So I thought, after months of deliberation, months of prayer, I felt like it was because I was supposed to start this Christian clothing line. And you guys have some shirts, you know what I'm talking about. But, and that was going to be my new career. And so after a long time of prayer, actually, it was, a lot. But I started having these issues. Something happened in the middle of the night one night, and I knew the sharp pains weren't going to go away. And that led us down the path to discovering on March 10th of 2015 that I had breast cancer at 36 years old with an 18-month-old. And that's why God was clearing my schedule, because I also found out it was invasive, and it had already spread to my lymph node, which is the way in which cancer spreads to all of your other organs. And so they wanted to move really fast, and that's just, some of it is just a blur. The great thing is that God showed me I was going to be okay at the beginning. I got a couple different confirmations. One was even with a text the morning I had the pains in the middle of the night. No one even knew. Jason didn't even know yet that I had pains. And I got a text from a friend, mentioned Hosea 2:14 and 15, I think, and said, I just woke up this morning feeling like you need to feel loved. I want to tell you that you're loved. And I was like, okay, I'm loved, but I was off to dealing with these pains and things. And it wasn't until about a week later that I decided to really go into the Bible and see what the verses said and see what this said. And it was just amazing. It was about God telling the people that he just needed to take them into the desert because they had a lot of distractions going on, and he needed to take them away from those distractions so he could tell them something that he really needed them to hear. And I said, okay. I said, I feel like I'm going to be okay. This is going to stink, but I'm not going to die from it. And obviously, there's some things that God needs to tell me. My life was full of distractions. My excruciating workload, my crazy 18-month-old toddler starting to run around everywhere. Jason being completely, enthralled with all of the Adonai house stuff. I had lots of distractions. I was even a workaholic, and God needed to just get my focus on him and prune me a little more than I had already been pruned. And it was scary. At the same time, I had a peace I had never had before. And it was immediate. Like, I remember going into surgery that was going to be 9 hours long with 2 surgeons, each about 4 hours, 4.5 hours. And I'm like taking selfies and posting on my Facebook page that, I know what God had shown me the verses that morning in the Bible. And it was just like this boldness of faith that I had never had. I certainly never mixed business with pleasure before Adonai. I mean, business with religion before Adonai. But now I'm, claiming it for my whole world that this is this is how I have this, fearless kind of just things going on in life. Like, just, I'm going through something hard, but I know God's in it, and he's going to show me each step of the way. I'd never had that before, and I've probably even said this to people before, and now I want to slap myself, but, oh, God doesn't give you anything you can't handle. That is absolutely false, and it's certainly not biblical. God does give you things that you can't handle, but he gives you things, and then you use him, and he equips you to handle them. And I learned that very quickly, and it's just like they say, God doesn't call the equipped, he equips the called. And I started learning things like that. And, even before then, Jason and I had basically, I'll just keep this part short, fallen out of the church for things that we felt were being taught that weren't biblical. And God used this time to really have us focus on the Bible and the whole Bible being true from beginning to end, Genesis to Revelation. And I don't have to tell you guys this because, you guys study this every day, but just an understanding of how far off our church today is. And I don't want to make this about condemning the church, but it is certainly what God was calling me and Jason to, was a further, deeper dive way below the surface and really getting to know who God is. Because we can say, I want to know who God is. I want a closer relationship with God. I want to hear from God. But if we don't do the things that God asks us to do, we're not going to have that relationship. So all those things said, God really gave me the strength that I needed to get through each day. And, it wasn't easy. Everything was such a whirlwind because they wanted me to have the surgery real fast. And, you need to go to this person. And, go to this reproduction specialist and go to this and this. Like, I didn't even have a clue. And I remember when my oncologist said, you're going to a reproduction specialist because you're not going to be able to have any more kids. And I remember thinking to myself in that moment, like, honestly, I remember screaming inside, but thinking in 1 second, this scream is going to be very vocal and outside. I mean, like, people are going to hear it outside. And it was, I just didn't think. We were getting ready to try to start having another kid when we went down the whole cancer path. And so that was another thing. Now I'm not in control. Now my life's not perfect. I don't have 2.2 kids, these different things. But in that very second, that first second when, seriously, this loud scream was in my head. And in the second, I just felt God saying, adoption. Like, Robin, you want a little girl. The only way I can, you can guarantee yourself that is to choose one that, needs a home. And I don't know if that will be the case. I don't know if that's a path. Every time that Jason and I talk about it, we end up laughing because we say we have adopted all of you guys. So we have all these guys that we have all these kids that we've adopted. But in the moment, it satisfied that need I had in my heart for not wanting to be told I couldn't have any more kids. And, lots of crazy things happen. You go in this whirlwind of this cancer diagnosis, and here, I only stuck to what my doctor said because that was safe for me. And basically, you don't have time to even think about anything. Like, I remember getting diagnosed. They told me I needed to have an MRI the next day to make sure it wasn't in my other breast. And I needed to tell them who my surgeon was going to be. So, it was like not even 24 hours. And I was thinking, huh? So luckily my OBGYN called back in time and told me the recommendations. But it moved that fast. And it's difficult for anyone to go through. But I just don't know how people don't go through it without Jesus. Because that peace was there, that even though we were facing the storm, there would be rainbows. And I feel like for me, it made me, and I knew this from the beginning, I had already felt it was going to make me a better mom and a better wife and a better daughter and a better friend and a better boss and, just an all-around better person. Because God was going to stretch me and stretch my faith and help me to continue the path in trying to become more like Christ every day. Not being perfect, but just showing up, doing, whatever I can to help others, doing what I feel God's called me to do, and being more like Christ every day. And so that's what I did. And it was hard. It was so hard on Jason because he was working here all the time. And no, I couldn't pick up, when I had the first surgery, I couldn't pick up Cross for 30 days. And at the time, he still slept in a crib, so he couldn't get out by himself. It was just insane. He was still waking up in the middle of the night. So, it was just this crazy thing, and I was really sick, and you just don't know which way is up. But I did know that Jesus was there. And these things, I'm not saying to be cliche, but because I live them, I just got it. Like I was able to feel, like I had grown over the years. I was able to start having emotions again and feel through counseling and, restoration. But truly, this was like the hardest thing that we've ever been through. But God was just continuing to laser focus our eyes on Him and working on our marriage and working on ourselves, and also taking this deeper dive into the Bible and what it says about everything. What it says about Jesus, who he was, how he walked this earth, how we should live our lives from beginning to end, New Testament and Old Testament. And we really use that time for that. I'm really lucky to have had this last little bit. I still, have not started back officially working, although I work for the Adonai Foundation, but don't get paid. But I've been able to heal, I've been able to help others. I've been able to stay at home with my son, which on some days is not as big of a blessing as I'd like for it to be, because he is a terrible toddler some days. I like to say Todzilla. But I wouldn't trade that time for anything, because I wouldn't have had that time. I would have glossed over that time. I would have still had an in-house nanny while I worked in the other room, and, gotten to hang out some while the nanny worked for my company. But still, I would have been missing out. I would have not had these opportunities. And that is one thing I want to mention, is that I was really scared at the beginning about finances, because there was a lot of things that I needed to take care of, financially I was responsible for. But God has just continued to make a way and bless us beyond measure. It's so hard to explain, but because sometimes we don't know how did this work out? How does this work out? And, there's things we're late on right now. And there's things that we wish we had that we cut out, or whatever. But we are secure in knowing that God makes a way, and that he hasn't disappointed us yet, and he won't disappoint us. We still have a roof over our head. We were able to keep this, the Adonai house open. We've been able to do things. And yeah, we have cancer bills still. And yeah, we have, things that we put on a credit card when we weren't using any credit cards before. And it doesn't look perfect. But man, I think back to how I thought we'd never even be able to own a home with what happened to me with the American Express card. And I just think, you have been so gracious to me, God. And, I think I'm just really excited about the future. He has laid this amazing vision on our hearts. And, of course, I want it in my timing, and his timing is perfect, and it hasn't happened yet, but we are resting on knowing that. And I'm healthy. I had a checkup yesterday, and my white counts are good, and my tumor markers are normal, and my platelets are good, and all of that stuff. And I think about how many people have actually gone through what I've been through and died, both from before with the abuse, or the drugs and alcohol, or with cancer. And it saddens me to no end about those things. And it makes me feel more blessed and fortunate that I do get to live this crazy life. I mean, and it is crazy, with just having crossed, but trying to do this, the stuff for the Adonai Foundation, while doing all this administrative stuff for my company from, that got left, to, trying to sell and get rid of all these different shirts that I have for my clothing line. And, just all these different things compile every day for me. So I love what I'm learning. It's that thing that we keep hearing, the more you know, the less you know. But I'm way more open now to finding out about different things that God has, in the Bible for us. I'm so much more open to things like the oils, to the floating, to the salt rocks, to the just learning about the earth and the water and all of these components of my life now. I feel God just continues to give us knowledge so that we can apply them and be better people and give back and be effective in other people's lives and show up. And sometimes that's not as easy as, once was for me, just for an energy level's sake. But I'm okay with that too. And thank God I went through perfectionism, like recovery and stuff for that, because I basically would have been awful with the cancer thing if I was still dealing with perfectionism. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like these things play out, and I know now anything that I go through, I will be able to use it, every bit of it, every ounce of it, to help someone else through the same thing. God recently put a 24-year-old in my path on a day that we were driving back from South Carolina and going to be in the car for about 9 hours, that was having something called a needle biopsy the next day, and had posted in this group that I belong to how she was starting to worry. She knew God was in control, but she didn't know what to expect and all these things. And I was able to, seriously, we talked back and forth for 9 hours, share with her exactly what to expect. And I was able to do so without saying, don't worry, you don't have cancer. But saying, hey, listen, I did have cancer, but look at all these things that I learned from it. And so just so you know, if you get this diagnosis, it's not the end of the world. And so it was just amazing, the relationship I was able to build with the 24-year-old in California that God just placed right in my path for just being open and willing and showing up. And you guys hear these things all the time, but that's basically it. I know God still has more to teach me. I mean, I still know I have a long way to go. I'm not where I want to be, but I'm not where I used to be. And I know that every day until Christ returns, I'm supposed to become more like Christ. And so that's what I set out to do, and I want others to know that. And, let's just hope that God really does give us the desires of our heart, because Jason and I really want for this next step with Adonai Restoration to be able to affect, you take what we've done here with you guys and others that are come through the program and put it on a much broader scale with people whose main issue isn't addiction but something else. And we believe 100% in life restoration, and we know that Jesus is the way to fully restore. We both believe we have been fully restored, and we just want to share what we've learned and what we've done with others. So, on that note, thank you guys for letting me share, and you can ask me any questions. Oh, you guys can ask me questions too online, whoever is online. So, okay. Don't be shy. Somebody's got to go first. I was just thinking Jason's probably typing a message in. Any questions? Yeah, I don't know. Let me see.
Says, thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing with us, Robin. You are so brave. Great job, Robin.
I just see an OMG from Maureen.
Yeah, it said Jason probably took over half the screen, FYI.
Oh, that's funny. Okay, questions.
It said you looked a lot calmer than Will.
Not calmer than me?
Yeah, wish I could hug you.
That's funny. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you, Erica. Oh, thank you, Melissa and John. I wish I was brave. I don't, you know, the funny thing about that, when you say being brave, God released me from that perfectionism. And so, and I say it so eloquently here somewhere because I had written it down, but I want to say, I just don't want to, it was so neat because I went from, here it is, I said, wow, I've been fortunate to meet a lot of people in my life, a lot of people. And maybe it's because I am supposed to let my life be the one that lights the way. How fitting for a perfectionist that I could actually have my life light the way. And thus I became the most transparent person ever. I began living a truly authentic life. I became the same person all the time, no matter where I was, no matter who I was around. God slowly got rid of all the bad things in my life. He allowed me to choose a different path, and I started living the right way. It's not perfect, but Jesus was perfect, so I don't have to be. And that's one of the things I think was really neat, is that he took that away from me. So instead of pretending to be these different things, I began to just put it all out there. And, you know, obviously, controlling and not just, vomiting it, but just to let other people know. And I feel like when people saw the real me, they actually said, oh, I feel so much better, because I thought you had it all together. And I'm like, whoa, I never knew that that's what being intimidating really was. I liked that people like Jason were intimidated by me. But now I just see it as, God gave me this life to share. And it's easier to share because it's not even my story. I'm so removed from it that even the more difficult things to share, to a room full of mostly men, was easier, if that makes sense. So.
They said, incredible story, Robin. Hadn't heard it in a long time, and it's amazing to see what God has done since I last heard it. Thank you for sharing. Thank you, Robin, for sharing your story. God is the God of restoration for sure, and I praise Him for your healing and all the work He is doing through you. I love you. Thank you, Robin. Makes me kick myself that we weren't more real during our early married days, so we could have helped each other more. I appreciate your authenticity, and that was Laura.
Oh, well, thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Mandy. Thank you, Laura. And I think that we can just all learn from it, that we just need to be real and mentor new couples in a different way and understand that spiritual warfare is a thing, and that our enemy, sometimes our worst enemy is Satan. Sometimes it's ourselves. But when it's Satan, that we just need to understand that he wants nothing more to do than to pull away a couple that's going to be powerful for the kingdom in God's name. And so we both did things in that first year that were just so uncharacteristic of us, and thankfully we figured that out at a time when we were able to correct it and move forward. So thank you guys for being here. All right, I can't believe you guys don't have any questions. Somebody come up with something.
I was just going to say, with the experiences that you went through and being on the other side in some way, what are some things you have advice for young individuals, like in their 20s, kind of going through this walk at this point in time in life? What kept you pushing?
Mm-hmm. I would say trust God and know everything for yourself. Like, don't trust necessarily everyone else's view of Christianity or what you should do. Trust the Bible. God gave us this one book to follow. We were asked to follow one person. That's Jesus. We weren't asked to follow anyone else in the Bible. They were all sinners, but he wasn't. We were asked to follow him. So I would tell people to maybe not do what your parents are doing, or maybe not just believe what's being taught to you, because it might not be filled with 100% truth. And so to test everything. It says that in the Bible. And hold on to what is good. And the other thing I would say is to just be real. No one really told me, oh, when you're in high school, things that happen, no one's ever going to remember. Heck, I just went to my 20th year reunion and was surprised that I remembered as many people as I did. you know, and that's probably because of Facebook, because if I hadn't seen names or a face in 20 years, I wouldn't have known who anyone is. So just to be real and to be flawed and to show that, to not try to be flawless, because you can't keep up with that all the time. And so what happens is whenever you have a flaw, you're still great, everything's still good, but you see it as such a bad thing that you're down on yourself about it. You give yourself things like anxiety or fears or these things. And we're getting into a very scary world, and it's only going to get worse. So we have to be happy with everything in us and about us. And I think really the Bible and Jesus is the only way for that. And for the girls out there, don't sleep around, don't do these things, don't do drugs, don't do anything that I've ever done. And for the moms, be honest with your kids that you've done these things so that it helps them to not fall in the traps, into the pitfalls of, you know, these things that are ailing our children. Dr. Jeffries?
When are you going to open the church?
The church.
Looks like a duck. Smells like a duck.
Oh, you're funny.
Smells like a duck. You're doing it already.
Yeah, well, we definitely feel like we are being the church. We feel like God called us to authentic community, being real, and we feel like we're doing that. We want to do it on a broader scale, and we want to not start a church. For anybody listening online, that is not what we want to do. We want to open a venue and that includes a non-alcoholic nightclub and other things during the day like fitness, which I think some people that are watching are part of the group Refit, which is the fitness training that I just got certified in last weekend in Orlando to teach basically movement and music for everybody and every body type, to uplifting music, to Hillsong Young and Free and Lecrae and of course Toby Mac and Holland. And so I'm really excited about that because we hope that to be a part of our overall vision for our non-alcoholic nightclub at night, fitness during the day, and lead people into this way to worship with just great music. Not necessarily Christian, and we definitely are not opening a Christian nightclub because we are not exclusive. We want to be inclusive of everyone and all peoples of all backgrounds and, economic status and all of that. And so we are hoping to open up a non-alcoholic nightclub.
Church.
Nah, don't say that. No, I did used to refer to it as we felt God was calling us to be the church outside the church, which he is.
It's a gathering of people.
Right, but...
Okay, the gathering. When you open your gathering?
It was going to be called Restoration.
Okay.
Because we believe that no matter where you're at, you're going to leave more restored than you came in. Whether you go to the fitness or the floating or the oils or the nightclub dancing, meeting people. It's all in a means to live a 100% restored life. And man, the world would be such a better place if we could all just get that down.
Yes.
All right, any other questions?
I heard through the grapevine that you took classes for
I
this.
just said that when you got
just
up.
said. Is there?
So you're asking because
Can you
you want to take
elaborate?
a class, right?
Essentially.
Yeah, so Alex had the amazing opportunity to one time be over keeping Cross, my son, while I decided to turn on one of the workouts so he could see it, and he was into it. Not gonna lie, he was into grooving and shaking. No, I'm just kidding, but no.
Adonai first.
That's not a
Jake
lot.
will be up there.
Yeah, well, and you guys know that we have talked about the Muay Thai for the guys side of it, which teaches respect, which is a lot of stuff for addiction. Hi, buddy. Hey. Ooh. Can you say hi? So do you have any questions, honey? None? Do you have any questions for Mommy?
Elmo show.
You want to go to the Elmo show? Okay. Yeah. Loves the Elmo show. Yes.
P. Diddy's in the house. What's up, P. Did?
Hi. Oh, you guys are going straight up video.
You gotta turn your mic on.
Turn your mic on. I can't hear you.
Rookies. Rookies.
Kelly said, yeah, that would be awesome.
Yeah, it's Paul, Miss Mandy and Mr. Paul, Max and Maddie's mommy and daddy.
Wow, is that the big
Hey,
surprise
back
in
on
2016?
Say it loud. Hi, we can hear you now.
Mandy just came right across the house concerned. She came into the bedroom and changed. She's like, I just changed in front of the computer. That's why you're supposed to laugh, everybody. Thank you. What's up, Will, Cody? What's up? Is there a delay? Is this like a satellite delay?
No.
I don't think so.
All right, tough crowd. Camera back up. Thanks for sharing, Robin.
Thank you guys for being here. We really appreciate it.
I've heard your testimony at least once before, but there's two parts, and always God using different ways to reveal things I know in my own walk. So I appreciate you sharing a lot.
Thank you, Paul.
What's up, Jake? Dr. J? I see you guys. Who's that guy over there with the hat on?
Alex.
I'll let you know as soon as you start writing that testimony.
Yeah, you know what? You know what? Fellow perfectionist, it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be. You just have to show up. I didn't read it. I didn't read anything tonight. So you could just show up next Friday. We'll let you in.
Actually, Greg Vossler will be giving his testimony.
Yeah, and if did you notice that the air is a little bit cleaner, a little bit cooler tonight? Anybody?
I'll let you know
Cody
at the
said
end of
it's
the month.
amazing.
I feel a little difference, but not too much. Seems cooler. Yeah,
Definitely blowing harder than it, at least.
there. I got a haircut.
I was going to say I did not recognize you. That's what's up.
Yeah,
Nice.
I had mastic all in my hair.
Nice.
So
Everything I did is working perfect, so.
I got the air return plenum mostly sealed up. Good. So.
Awesome. I'll be over there Monday morning again.
Yeah, Paul doesn't do well with mimosa.
Wow.
Yeah, and Paul, I'm serious about getting you on the schedule to give your testimony.
And I'm serious in not answering.
We'll just put you on the schedule.
Hi,
What is this? The angel on my shoulder. My angel?
Erica was like, I've been wondering who you were this whole time.
That's so funny. Eric just cut his hair off. Hilarious.
Yeah, I thought it was somebody new. I'm like, hey, who's that?
Oh, hey, Cross. Liam's mommy just wrote you a message. She
This
says,
came out, but everything
Hi,
else
come here.
up here was all like hard as a rock and wouldn't come out. So I was like, oh man.
There's this moment, we're taking a break, kind of over to your left, Jason, underneath the kitchen somewhere. We're pretty much done, we're wrapping up, and we're all having this powwow laughing.
Can I have it?
Fall back out from underneath, and all of a sudden I look, his whole beard is like gray and white with plaster, his hair is all stuck. I'm like, dude, you are shellacked. You're in trouble.
say
Yeah.
hi, you say loud to him. Hey,
Eric
guess what?
likes to get into his work.
Hi.
Hey,
She was up underneath stairwell where it's really
Liam's mom
tight.
is on there, and she says, "Hi, Cross. Liam misses you."
So thank you, Eric. That was awesome.
Welcome.
Hi.
Cross is
Hi,
saying
Cross.
hi. I'm gonna say hi to Heather too, real quick. That she is listening from Canada, so that's really cool. She just said Liam misses you. And Heather, we were wanting to do a Facebook video call with you sometime, so Cross could talk to Liam.
That's Daddy. Mommy.
Oh, and they did. They turned off their video.
Cross? Liam?
But that was Max and Maddie's mom. So, all right, cool. All right. Well, if there's no other questions, I know you guys are probably dying for a smoke break. So. Good?
All right, let's pray.
Father God, we thank you for today. Lord, we thank you for your testimony. Lord, may it continue through each of us. Lord, help us grow to face our weakness and seek your perfection, Lord. Thank you for Robin and placing her in this current position, keeping her in a position in my life through difficult times and through great times, Lord. I just praise you for her and what you've done in her and through her, Lord. And we pray all these things in Yeshua's name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you guys for being here. Kim, you want to turn this off?
Deuces.